So anyway, I was talking a bit more about the cool Pearl Harbor sequence in this movie, which is my big number one positive. We eventually get to the sequence where our two main protagonists, Rafe and Danny, along with their fighter pilot buddies, finally are able to get up in the air. They get to this spare airfield that hasn't been attacked yet, and they're able to get two planes up in the air, and they go at it, and they pull off some pretty sick moves up in the air. There's this to get the Zeros off their tail. They do this move that they were practicing earlier in the movie, where they fly at. They each have two Zeros on their tail, and they fly each other, and they like cross by each other, and they cause the Zeros to crash into one another, and it's pretty epic. And then they obviously go out to Battleship Row and start lighting up some Zeros. They're like, we're not going to let them get away. And it's just like, you're like, yeah, as the audience, it really pumps you up. Because, we've been having overall it was obviously a defeat, but, we get some cool American vengeance in there, against the Japanese. And then, but overall, the Pearl Harbor sequence is so well done. I mean, Michael Bay, think what you will of him, but I mean, he does. I've always thought he does a decent job with like the big spectacles.
Oh, he does. And, that's his forte is big boobs.
Yeah, I know you're not the biggest fan of his action necessarily.
No, I'm not.
But I think here he does a good job with the bombs, with the explosions. They look real. Like they show it they show wide shots of the explosions, like of the ships just absolutely coming apart.
Yep.
And there's the final point I'll make about the Pearl Harbor sequence. I love how it makes a point of showing the sinking of the USS Arizona.
Yeah.
Because that's the most well-known ship that went down, and obviously it's very famous because there's people still down there that weren't able to get their bodies were never able to be recovered. But it really shows just the ship sinking, and they're all kind of like on the Titanic. They're all just clinging to the side and doing everything they can to stay on. And it's a real overall the 40-minute sequence. It's really emotional, but it also does have those moments where it gets you pumped up, like when the two guys finally get up in the air and do their business.
Yeah, they were flying American P-40s, and there was another type of American plane called a P-400. And there was a joke during the Second World War. They would say, what's a P-400? And they would say it's a P-40 with a zero on its tail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you were supposed to laugh.
Yeah.
At least it's supposed to be.
What's another big positive for you?
So here's the thing. Honestly, in a culture where we were consistently making good movies, this one would not rank super high. But right now we're in a time where a lot of bad movies are considered good. And so this movie gets that benefit. It gets a little bit of a bump up for me because of all of the horrible things, all the horrible movies that are... Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because basic things like good morals and patriotism in this movie go a long way to make me enjoy it.
Yeah, it has some good patriotic moments for sure.
And it doesn't even demonize the Japanese. Like, it shows their perspective. Like, dang, we're running out of oil. War is inevitable. It showed their perspective truthfully, but also it doesn't demonize the Americans like is so common in today's media. And it's got these cool moments where you've got the American flag in the water with everyone swimming, and then that moment where the cook goes up and picks up the Arizona state flag after the USS Arizona sank, and the ending, monologue is about how America overcame through the harsh trials of World War II.
That was some of the better dialogue in the movie. Was that final that final monologue was pretty good.
And so I like
in a movie where the dialogue is not great, as we'll get to that soon. But
back in 2001, it was easier to be patriotic and everybody to go
because this came out a few months before 9/11. So
wow,
this was even before 9/11.
I didn't even think about that. That's kind of weird. Another disaster that kicked off a war. But, so that's what I would say, the good morals and the patriotism. It's got good morals like courage and stuff. We can talk more about that during the themes section, but I think that it's worth saying that it's positive that it didn't... I guess it's because it was...
It moves you. It can be very emotional, especially in that second half.
Yeah, it's got good morals.
Yeah.
So.
Another positive of mine, the score by Hans Zimmer is, as usual, top-notch. I will say the one thing, it does play the main theme a bit too much. It plays that. Yeah, I just noticed that it plays that kind of central love theme when they're and also when they're flying the planes at the beginning and the end. It plays that a bit too much throughout the film, but it's a great piece of music. It just that's a little nitpick, but I love the score overall. It has the rousing kind of battle action music that plays during Pearl Harbor. But in that same sequence, it has some real emotional music that plays, when the nurses are all scrambling to do whatever they can to save American lives. And then, but you also just have kind of the love theme music. I'm not a big fan of the romance in the movie, but I do enjoy. It's a good piece of music that he composed for that whole plot line. And then, but yeah, I mean, what else can I say? Hans Zimmer is just a great composer. You know, he's still doing it now today. So, you know, but this is kind of like, this was at his like peak. I feel like this kind of era, like,
yeah,
then kind of like in the early 2000s, he was at his like peak of power. You know, I mean, and then he obviously eventually started working with Nolan on the Dark Knight movies and doing scoring a lot of his movies. But yeah, this was just it's an underrated score by him. I forgot that he even composed this music, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's Hans Zimmer. Maybe that's why I enjoy it so much.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the score is good. Is very good in this movie.
Honestly, as far as positives, I think that covers it. Like, the action sequences are good, the music's good, the themes are good.
Was there anything you wanted to point out about the Pearl Harbor sequence or Doolittle's Raiders?
No, so I agree with everything John said about the Pearl Harbor sequence.
Same thing,
like,
I agree with
Michael Bay does disaster films the best, or disaster sequences. I don't think he does a lot of disaster films other than this one. Yeah. But the chaos and the gore and stuff. I mean, it's not gory, but it's a great.
There is an R-rated director's cut. We were not able to find it. It has like a minute of extra footage. I think it just has some more gory shots, maybe during the Pearl Harbor sequence.
Yeah.
It was not. It wasn't available on Prime, so we just watched the PG-13 toned down version. But anyway, it still shows a good bit though. Like, I mean, it still shows a good bit of, violence, and people get lit up with machine gun, by the guns on the planes, the
and then obviously the Doolittle raid is super awesome.
Yeah. I know you like that sequence, so maybe that could be your third positive.
Yeah, I love the Doolittle raid sequence at the end. I think it actually wrapped, like, at first I was like, this is kind of tacked on at the end, and then I was like, this kind of wraps up the whole thing on a positive note, because you can't really understand the story of Pearl Harbor without knowing how the United States responded to it.
Yeah, I feel like I have mixed feelings on the Doolittle part, because I like how it's a cool sequence in the movie, and I feel like it's added in there to wrap up, so they can wrap up the main character stories.
Oh, for sure.
And that's gonna be one of my nitpicks on the movie, because I do feel like it's a little bit tacked on, because in a movie about I'll get into that movie in a minute.
Well, I enjoyed it.
It is a cool sequence, though.
It's such a cool
in and of itself.
They ratchet up the tension on that so much.
Yeah.
And
I like Alec Baldwin as
Doolittle.
As Doolittle. I think he gives the best performance in the movie to me.
Yeah,
I love him as Doolittle.
We can talk about that too. But I think that covers all of the positives of this movie. So you want to go to
I have one more. Okay. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the acting. There's some bad acting, and I'll get into that, and then there's some good acting. Like I said, Alec Baldwin as Jimmy Doolittle was really good. And you wouldn't expect him. He's done
Roosevelt.
Oh yeah, John Voight as President Roosevelt. He was really good. He just did a great job of kind of showing the emotions of the man, and like how there's some great scenes where he's just being given news about what's happening, and he just has some real kind of raw reactions that felt very real. Like you felt like that's what he would say. He would just be like, "God help them," And he did a great job. John Voight did. Alec Baldwin did a great job. The thing about Alec Baldwin's portrayal is that I would not pick him for that role, because he's been in a lot of comedic roles. He's also done some serious roles, but I would not pick him to play Doolittle in a movie about the Doolittle that has the Doolittle raids in it. But then again, he did a great job. So that was good casting there. And there was one other performance I liked. I liked the guy who he has a very minor role. The kind of the admiral at Pearl Harbor.
I was going to say that too.
He did a very good job. He doesn't have a lot of scenes, but he did a great job. And anything you want to say?
And honestly, compared to the two male actors, the girl who played Evelyn did a good job.
I thought she did the better job.
She did better than them. That's what I'm like.
Spoiler alert! My negatives on the acting are going to be about the Ben Affleck and Hartnett. But
yeah.
But I mean, and then the one other portrayal that I loved was I loved Dan Aykroyd as the code guy. That's this is what he's like. I love this line where he's like, they're like, so is that what you would do? He's like, well, I'm not responsible for making these decisions. That's your job. I'm just the guy who breaks the codes.
It's so funny. You were talking about breaking this movie into two halves.
Yeah.
And there really are, even in the first part, these two storylines, and you've got the main characters and their love affairs and whatnot. And then you've got, like, at the same time, you've got this starkly different, just like leading up to Pearl Harbor sequences, and it's like the Navy.
It's a weird contrast, and that's going to be a nitpick of mine. It feels weird.
But what's interesting is you got the Navy intelligence, you got the Japanese
that's all
getting
cool.
ready.
I love
and
that
you know
stuff.
what's so funny about it is you could cut all of the love scenes,
And
all
you
of
could
the
still have
main
a-
scenes
yeah.
out, and you would still have a really good movie about Pearl Harbor.
It could just be those two guys with these random guys who just were there and like
Yeah.
just got up in the air and took out a bunch of
I mean,
cigarettes.
yeah, like I would challenge
And then
someone.
fought in the Doolittle
I would
race.
challenge someone to make a cut of this movie where none of
A
the
fan
love
cut.
stuff happens. Like
Yeah.
it's just like, you know, if anyone's seen the new Midway, it's like that except Pearl Harbor. You could actually do that with this. movie.
Wait, New Midway, the one that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
So what did they do?
No, like the point is that was just about
Oh, it shows
the Midway.
yeah, but that movie actually does have a depiction of Pearl Harbor right at the beginning.
Yeah,
if
it
you
does.
remember.
It
Yeah,
does.
very brief.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that like it was about like there was
Well,
other
yeah,
stuff, but
well,
it was about the Midway.
Yeah.
You know, incident.
It didn't have,
Battle
like, this
entirely.
fictional
No,
story
it didn't.
behind
So if
it.
you cut out the fictional story,
Yeah.
you could keep all the true stuff, and it would be really good still, and it would be like actually like a watchable length.
Yeah, I know.
So-
But anyway, I'll just wrap up my positive. I really like Dan Aykroyd's performance. Once again, he's a comedic actor. He was in like Ghostbusters.
Oh my gosh.
He's been in, he's mainly a comedic actor. And I mean, part of his role is kind of darkly funny because he's so like, just like, this is what I think. You don't have to do it, but this is what I would recommend. He's just so straightforward and with
Yeah.
what he says to his commanding officers. But I just love this character. He's once again a very minor role, but I think that was good casting because
Yep.
he really nailed it. Alrighty, well, like I said, this movie has
Negatives.
some big negatives.
So I gotta tell the audience, the plan for this movie was to watch it and just like totally rat on it.
Yeah.
We thought it would be fun to have an episode where we do the classic like make fun of a movie.
But
for
the thing
clicks
is, since we mainly do historical movies, there's not a lot of really bad historical
No,
movies,
and
and this is one that definitely gets more hate.
Yeah,
for sure.
unfortunately, the movie turned out to be better than we expected.
It grew on me a little bit as well.
We expected it to have like hardly any positives, and
See-
while this movie has flaws,
Yeah.
it is good.
Yeah, it's
So,
okay.
unfortunately, we're gonna have to give you a nuanced opinion that's not. Super
No, just for
historical.
y'all's information, he had not seen it. I had.
Yeah,
So,
I haven't seen this movie, but I'd always been told that this movie was really bad. which
from
it
his
was-
brother, Noah.
Yeah, no, and also from my
And me,
dad.
and
My
me,
dad
yeah.
doesn't like this movie, but then
And-
again, I shouldn't have listened to him because he didn't like Kingdom of Heaven. So
Okay.
like,
I'm not. I mean, as you'll see, I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't. He'll probably give it a higher rating than I will.
Yeah, I will.
But anyway, if you want me to go. You want to go first on negatives?
yeah, I'll go first. So I'm gonna steal John's thunder on this one, and you were welcome to elaborate on
Oh,
this.
I
But
will.
the acting, is
I will.
The acting,
The main character.
the main character acting.
AKA Ben Affleck and Josh Hartnett.
Ben Affleck in particular.
He is.
He
it
has
was
so
bad.
he has this. So it's funny because the character is a little bit inconsistent. I think he was a little bit in love at the beginning, but he's like this tripping over himself, really like
Those seasons
can't
really hard to
talk,
watch.
right? Like cute, supposed to be like insecure but cute in a way, like Tennessee guy with this accent, and then he's like for the rest of it he's like this tough guy, which I don't get how that
Yeah.
happens. But I guess he was in
true.
love or whatever. But his accent's not great, and
Not
in
at
his
all.
defense, a lot of the lines that they gave him were not stellar.
Randall Wallace did not do a great job.
Like
with the
it was
representation.
just like I get that you can only do so much with a love plot, like you have to reuse old themes. But this was a little bit ridiculous.
This was very cliche.
It was a little bit ridiculous.
And very,
like the "You're so beautiful."
She
like,
said that so many
like
times.
5 times. I feel like even Evelyn was bored of it. She was
Yeah,
like,
I know.
"Dude, think of something else to say." And then, like as John will elaborate on, the love story kind of kicks off strange with this lady giving him shots in his butt.
No, first she passes him
Yeah, she passes him.
and he shouldn't be able to be passed because of his vision, and she.
And I
gives
feel
him
like
a
the
pass
coup de
on
grace of all the awkward love scenes is when he gets hit in the nose at the cork.
That
and,
is-
and he's like, let me just fall over
Never do
into
the
your
line,
lap
never do the
here.
line. Hurt somewhere fierce.
It's not even the line. It's the way he's like, let me fall
Yeah, I know.
over
He's like,
into your lap here. And it was so awkward. It's like, oh gosh, that was
You
bad.
verbally were indicating that you were just like, oh, this is hard to watch.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and so and during some look, I'm a man. I'm a more emotional man, I would say, but even I, as a more emotional man, found myself bored during some of the love scenes. Like I was like,
It's
can
just
I get
cringe.
something to eat? Maybe I'm gonna check my phone. Like it was just a little bit boring. And if you got a woman in here, you'd probably get a different take on it, because.
well, I don't know. That's pretty cringy dialogue. I'll
Yeah,
elaborate on it.
yeah,
a
and then
bit,
the
too.
other guy, his acting is equally bad. I mean, like, let's be fair here. They're Hollywood actors. They do a good job. But for Hollywood movies, like, it wasn't great.
Yeah, it was not good acting.
No, it was not. I mean, of course.
I get what you say that they're professionals, so you can't. But it was bad acting.
Yeah, but like for professionals, it wasn't good. Like
Yeah.
comparatively to other movies, like if you compare this to Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight,
Yeah.
it doesn't even compare.
Talk a little bit about Hartnett's performance as as Danny. 'Cause...
Yeah, Danny. So like honestly, I spent the whole movie being so mad at Danny because that paints my color.
That's the most that name fits with like a guy who would steal somebody's wife, Danny.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
So
Or not steal, but
and I'm also
he
not.
thinks he's stealing. He thinks
Evelyn-
he's stealing. Well, no, they think he's dead, so you can't really blame him too much.
Yeah, but like if you remember the line from The Princess Bride, it's like, "Tell me truly, did you wait 1 week out of respect for the dead?" Like, what was that line he said? Did you get married the next day, or did you wait 1 week out of respect for the dead? She waited 3 months and then was already in another relationship. So like, yeah. Anyway, John, you can elaborate on this.
Okay, but you said you had some thoughts about the nurse, about her betrayal.
I thought she did better than them.
Yeah.
She did better than them.
In what way?
She was just less corny.
Yeah.
And also,
Her emotions came out more, I feel like.
I don't know who that actress is, but she is
Kate Beckinsale.
strikingly beautiful.
Yeah,
so
she
maybe
is,
she was just a little bit more easy
Yeah.
on the eyes than
yeah, she is pretty good looking.
than what's his face, the Batman guy, Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck.
Maybe she was just a little bit more easy on the eyes.
You know what's funny though is that Jennifer Garner, who's in this, she plays one of the nurses. She got married to Ben Affleck.
Really?
Yeah, they got divorced.
Oh,
But, yeah,
wow.
that was interesting. But all right, yeah. So I'll just elaborate. The dial. Sorry, we're having to kind of.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
The dialogue. You just want to turn it off.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, the dialogue in this movie is
During
like,
the love scenes.
Yeah, in the first half of this movie, I mean, the dialogue, even like, I would say, during the love scenes, but I'd say even a lot of the dialogue between like the two best friends, it's just like so cliche and so like on the nose. And they're so like straightforward and just like, But yeah, during the love scenes, the dialogue written by Randall Wallace it's shockingly bad. It's like
And a little bit boring.
it's terrible. Like there's so many cringy one-liners. Now, one time I liked it because they referenced that it was bad in the script. The guy says, "No, that was a bad line." He's trying to like pick up this nurse at like a bar or something, and he admits it was a bad line. So I liked that. That was cool. But it takes itself so seriously. Like it's using all these cringy one-liners. It's especially cringeworthy in the letters they write to one another.
Yeah.
And I forget the line she says.
She
says, "I will take every ray of the sun and like use it to radiate towards you," or something.
She says, "Every night I look at the Hawaii," something to the effect of, "Every night I look at the Hawaiian sunset and like soak up its last warmth and then try to transmit it to your heart." And
I mean, it is like so bad. I mean, and what's honestly more devastating about this is that it was written by the same guy who wrote the amazing script of Braveheart and We Were Soldiers. And it's just like,
Both
We
of
Were
which
Soldiers
have
was
really-
after this, so he did kind of write the shit. But Braveheart was before this, and then he did this. And it's like, what? I mean, come on, Randall. I mean, and he wrote a good romance in that movie. Braveheart has a great little romance in there. And it doesn't have any of this cheesy, cringeworthy dialogue. It's just like, this movie, I don't know, man. He just was saying, I get maybe he was just under the gun or something, and he was just like, I have to put in every cliche line that I can is going in this movie. Like you're beautiful, like a million times.
Yeah, and
I mean, my word. It's just bad. The screenplay of this movie, especially in the first half,
especially in the first half,
and the screenplay and the script that for the love scenes, for the lovey-dovey scenes, is just absolutely terrible.
Yeah,
that's all I can say.
It's just bad. It's subpar.
The acting does not do anything to make it better.
Yeah, I mean, in their defense, they were working with bad material. I mean, it's not the worst thing.
I mean,
I've ever seen.
I wonder if. It's not the worst what?
No, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. Like I add
the
that
dialogue
just,
or the acting.
Just because like there's so many bad movies now, it bumps it up.
Yeah.
But like from objective standards, it should be better.
Yeah. It's
a
not
little,
good.
A little side note is that this isn't like a total rat on the movie because this was kind of unavoidable, but the thing where he comes back from the dead, you could see that from 1,000 miles away. Like, if that plot device was being written in California, you could see it from Hawaii.
Well, they freaking top bill Ben Affleck in this movie. You know he's not going to die in the first 30 minutes.
Also, he's
on the freaking poster of the movie.
The whole thing about her getting with the other guy when he's dead, I knew the whole thing was going to happen as soon as he left. Basically, as soon as, whenever he told his friend that he needed to tell Evelyn if he died, I was like, I think I see where this is going. And that was an hour before even any of that even happened. Not to mention the fact that they never even show Affleck take an injury. So it's
yeah. There's so many other just weird scenes to watch in this movie, though. The scene where they go... most of them are the lovey-dovey or dating type of scenes. But, that scene where he comes back and she's like... I forget what she says, but she's basically like, we can't be together anymore. When he shows up at her door, and then Danny comes out. And it is so awkward and so in a bad way. It's just the dialogue's as bad as it usually is in this movie, and it's just so awkward. And there's another scene, like Nate said, there's a lot of scenes where Danny and Rafe can't are kind of speechless, and they can't really get their words out, and it's so weird to watch. It's not good. The acting isn't good enough to actually make it come across like they're kind of speechless, and the dialogue obviously isn't good, and it combines to make a very awkward scene.
Yeah, the plot, you can see that from 1,000 miles away. Yeah. In the dialogue.
The acting's pretty... The main character acting is pretty subpar. The dialogue sucks in the first half of this movie. And really just the romance doesn't really make a lot of sense. You pointed this out. It's literally they go on one date. And it's hardly even a date. It's like he pops a cork into his nose, and then it's
I get
she falls in love with him.
I do understand that they didn't have time to properly develop the love scene. When we say love scene, we don't mean like sex scene. That's not what we mean.
We're talking about the romantic.
It's scenes. A PG-13 movie, so there's a makeout scene between him and her and Danny.
Well, yeah, it's
but I will say, even though I didn't like the acting and everything, I was so mad at Danny for taking his girl. That made me viscerally angry. I was dude, don't do that. Even if my best friend had been dead for 10 years, I'd be like, maybe he could come back.
The thing about it I didn't like is that Danny doesn't show much emotion about it. He says he's kind of sorry, and he says we thought you were dead and all that.
What a crybaby.
He still doesn't show that the actor doesn't really bring out the emotion that the character would have. He would really feel bad about it, I would think.
He takes I feel like he would feel guilt for it, but he doesn't. And also he doesn't.
He's just she's my girl now, bro. I'm sorry. I thought you were dead. That's literally what he says, basically. And she says that too, though.
Yeah, and then the other thing that irks me is that finally he I don't even like that character. I just feel bad for him that he got so duped. He was all fighting the freaking Germans. Pay him some respect. Anyway, he was I just want to know why. I'm gonna walk away. He says I just want to know why. And she doesn't answer and says I'm pregnant. She had no reason.
There's a lot of dialogue in this movie that it's just so sudden. What they say is just so out of the blue. I'm pregnant, and then it's what?
Well, she was clearly using the shock value of that to hide from the fact that she had no good reason for being. Anyway, so.
But also, you were talking about fighting the Germans. That brings me back to a positive I forgot to mention.
Okay.
I like the opening scene to this movie. The opening scene's very well done. It's it takes place in Tennessee in 1923, and Rafe and Danny are both little boys, and they're flying this plane as best they can, and they actually kind of get it off the ground. It's a crop dusting plane. Yeah. And then the dad of, I believe, Danny, who's a World War I vet, comes out, and he's obviously he all has PTSD and is messed up and stuff, and he's kind of a rough dude, and then he kind of takes his son home, and then his the other kid, I think Rafe comes and beats him with a wooden board with a 2x4, and then he's get off him, you German. And I love the way he was you call me a German? I was fighting the Germans. But it's the acting there is really good. The guy who played Danny's dad did a really good job, because the music swells in the background, and you're oh shoot, this guy's seen stuff. And it was a good opening to the movie. I like the opening scene, and the closing scenes are pretty good too in this movie.
A negative that I can mention is, and this is so funny because it's bad. This is what I'm about to mention. It's bad in the first half and then better in the second half, just like the love stuff.
Yeah.
But the CGI in the first half was pretty bad. Granted, it's 2001, but they were like making planes do stuff in the CGI that planes don't do. And like even the way that they would shoot down planes, like anyone who's played DCS knows that you don't just shoot the head off of a plane. Like that's not how it works. That's what they were doing. They kept shooting the heads off planes, and it's like, what is that even? But then later in the movie, they corrected it in this really great scene where he was on the tail of a Zero at Pearl Harbor, and it was spitting machine gun fire just like it looks like in real life, and it took the wing off, which is much more realistic. And so for some reason they like corrected that, but not all the way. It was kind of strange.
I do enjoy most of the dogfights in this movie, though.
Yeah, like I like the dogfights in the second half of the movie.
Yeah.
In the first half of the movie, they're kind of weird.
The one on the Battle of Britain, when he goes down where he crashes.
Exactly. That one's just kind of weird.
Yeah.
The
way it plays out. Well, it doesn't. It just kind of. It's like all of a sudden he crashes. It doesn't really build up to it. It's just kind of like he gets hit and he's going down.
Yeah. Well, it's just more the way that they make the planes move. Like anyone who's got a passing familiarity with aerial maneuvers would look at that and be like, that planes don't do that. But later on they correct it and it looks much better. I do have another negative.
I do too as well.
Like I loved the Pearl Harbor scene, and the one where they were fighting in the P-40s was awesome too. But also it was ridiculous how they didn't get shot down because it
was very movie-esque.
They were getting trailed by 3 Zeros each for like 5 minutes straight, and the Zeros are just like and just can't hit them at all.
Yeah.
They just fly straight.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with the turnaway maneuver, like that is ridiculous.
Yeah,
obviously.
it is cool in the movie though.
It's cool in the movie.
It's pretty epic, you know.
But they would have gotten shot down so fast because there were so many Zeros and they were chasing them the whole time. They just couldn't even hit them right, and at some points just refused to shoot at them entirely, which was so strange. You want to comment on that, John?
Oh yeah. I would just say that. I mean, I enjoyed the dogfights for the most part. I get what you're saying. They can be a bit unrealistic at times. Very, movie-esque. They have to make it action-packed, probably more crazy than they would be in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't. It's not. It didn't like stand out to me. I mean, I enjoyed the dogfights. They're probably one of my
the
favorite
dogfights were
parts of
fun
this
to
movie.
watch, definitely.
Yeah.
But it was just.
I get what you're saying.
There were so many Zeros on their tail for so long.
Yeah.
They should have got. And the other thing is that they weren't doing any evasive maneuvers. They were just flying straight, like really low to the ground. Again, anyone who's played DCS or War Thunder knows that you will get shot down within seconds of doing this. Like you do want to dive towards the deck in order to pick up airspeed, but after that point, you got to start pulling some stuff.
Yeah. So I'll go on, if you're finished, I'll go on with another big negative of mine, because like I said, I do have several. So obviously, in addition to the bad dialogue and the bad acting, I will say the atrocious dialogue and the bad acting, at least in the first half of the movie, like I said earlier, I hinted at it, I enjoy the Doolittle sequence in and of itself. It's a cool sequence to watch. I do not like it in this movie though. Like as part of this movie, I don't think it fit. Like I don't. It feels very much like an epilogue, and it's a movie called Pearl Harbor, but the Pearl Harbor sequence happens, and you still have an hour left in the movie. And it just feels weird. This might be a little bit more of a nitpick. This isn't a massive negative because the sequence is watchable. It's well done. I enjoy it. It's just it feels very much like an epilogue, and it's kind of just added on. And I get that they have to wrap up the main character stories, but I mean not really. They could have had just ended it with Pearl Harbor and then had some scenes after that where they resolve their conflict. But it just feels added on and a little bit unnecessary. The whole Doolittle sequence in this movie, it always has. It's always felt kind of odd to have that in there. But
now I'm gonna do the rare here and actually disagree with John.
Oh yeah.
I like the Doolittle raid sequence, and I am biased because I like it because Danny dies, and Rafe gets the girl back, and that made me feel like yes, everything is right with the world. But on a more serious note, it is like as far as story beats are concerned, it is a little bit jarring. I grant that.
That's what I mean.
Because I was watching it and I was like, oh wait.
You felt it.
We're still going?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
We're still going. and we are.
That's my negative.
It's good. It's a little bit tacked on.
No, that's my negative. I enjoy the sequence.
Yeah, the sequence is
I
fun.
don't, but I mean, this leads me into a little bit of another negative. This movie goes for all these emotional moments, and I feel like besides the whole Pearl Harbor sequence, it doesn't really hit home on a lot of them. Obviously, the romance is just not very good in general, but it tries to be a real emotional romance that's packed with all these kind of twists and turns, and it just, because of the bad acting and bad dialogue, that's part of it. Because of these factors, these emotional moments just don't hit home. Now, the emotional ones that do hit home are the Pearl Harbor sequence. I mean, that how can that not hit home with you as an American, especially
coming out of the USS Arizona?
But then again, that has nothing to do with this cheesy romance. And so everybody, even in the second half, even at the end of the Doodle Raid, the scene where Danny dies, like it tries to go for this like emotional death scene where it's like they're both really sad, and I don't know, it didn't hit home for me. I mean, you feel bad that he has to die, but it wasn't like as emotional as it should be. I mean, these are like two best friends who've been best friends all their life, and it's just kind of he dies, and there's some weird dialogue that he says, and
I do think that they found a way to move in the movie on a really satisfying note.
Yeah,
I liked that because they really. Anyone, even if you were on team, what I don't know their names, Team Danny or Team Rafe, you still felt a little bit happy because it ends up Rafe gets the girl, but only because he died heroically and he's raising Rafe's son. So Danny's son, excuse me. Danny's son. And so his bloodline lives on. And so it's a satisfying ending for both the characters, and so it preserves their friendship and the rest. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, no, I agree with that. I just don't think that final scene where he dies came off as what they were trying to get it to come off as. It wasn't as emotional and like heartbreaking.
It was a little bit melodramatic
the
way that he was dying and then the Japanese came and then they shot him more, so he was
very overdramatic.
That was a little bit weird. But anyway.
No, but and then one final negative I have. I really wish that they had made a movie that wasn't centered around a fictional romance. I really think like we see glimpses of how this movie can be great in that second half. When Michael Bay is doing a war movie in this, he does it well in this effort. However, the first half is obviously all about the romance, and ultimately the whole movie is kind of, because even in the second half, it's still all sprinkled in there. You still have a lot of cringy dialogue that has to do with the main characters, even in the second half of the movie. But the second half of the movie is much more of a war movie, and so it's much better than the first half. However, I really wish they had just not centered it all around these kind of unlikable, cringy, characters who speak the word, who give the worst dialogue imaginable. I wish that they had really just gone for a completely historical interpretation and had it be all about the Japanese perspective and the American perspective, just building up to Pearl Harbor.
You could edit that out of this movie.
Yeah. But that's what they did in a movie called Tora Tora Tora, which came out, I believe, in 1970. That's the approach they took. I don't know if they just wanted to be different, but I think this movie would have been possibly great if they had never included a cheesy romance. You could still cast Ben Affleck, you could still cast the actors that they do, and they could just play different types of characters.
What was Tora 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 about?
It's about Pearl Harbor.
Oh, really?
It doesn't have any. It's just a straight line. It's very very much. It's not a documentary. It's a feature film, but it just covers the Japanese perspective and the American perspective. We can review that one day. Maybe. But I just wish that this movie had just taken more of a historical view and just had it be about the history behind Pearl Harbor, because I think when it does take that point of view, it works very well.
No, you can't blame them because romance sells in the box office.
Yeah.
And so I get why they did that. But again, I agree with John on this one.
I just think it would have been a better movie because you can see the glimpses of greatness. Like when it's showing all the cool historical perspectives of like the Japanese and the Americans and Roosevelt.
Like it feels like two different movies.
Yeah.
And you could really edit the one part out of it and you would have like an hour and a half long movie that's really good.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And I also feel like taking that perspective would have even done a better job at memorializing the event because, this movie definitely does a decent job with the Pearl Harbor sequence of, helping people to remember the event. But I think it would have even done a better job at doing that if it hadn't been centered around a totally fictional love triangle. It could have even done a better job at memorializing this pivotal event in American history. So yeah, that's a negative of mine. I just wish they hadn't taken the angle they took.
Themes?
But anyway. All right, themes, yeah.
Moving on to themes, everybody. I'm up first. I'm going to do an unexpected one because this is one that it's not really toted by the movie, but I think is a really good lesson that we can learn from it, and that is forgiveness. I think Rafe is super mad about the whole thing whenever he gets back, but he actually ends up forgiving his best friend, which is really crazy that he had the strength to do that. Like, if you got the love of his life and your best friend is going to marry her, seems like it would be really easy to harbor that anger against both of them forever. But he lets it go, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, John?
I agree. That's definitely a theme in there, yeah, forgiveness. And he does it relatively quickly. Like, he's really mad at first, and then he, like, kind of, they had the bar fight, and then they kind of were just like, the next morning, they're like, we gotta resolve this, bro. We gotta get on with our lives. And obviously they fight at Pearl Harbor and fight Doughboys Raiders. But yeah, that's definitely a theme. A theme I take away is just like sacrifice.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously this is a movie about Pearl Harbor and all the people who died there. And I love how it portrays the sacrifices of the nurses.
Yeah.
And how they sacrifice even literally like their personal things to like help with the effort.
Yeah, like at one point she takes her pantyhose off to like make a tourniquet.
And they use her lipstick to
mark people.
Yeah. And but also obviously the sacrifices of the guys who actually get up in the air. I mean, there's one guy who almost gets up in the air and then he gets taken out. And then obviously the two guys who do get up in the air, Danny and Rafe. I mean, they could have just gone and hid and just try to make it out alive, which fortunately they still do, but they don't. They actually take the imperative, they take action, and they do what they can to help with the effort to get the Japanese, or basically to inflict some damage on the Japanese and not just let them get away.
Make them pay.
Yeah, not just let them get away, scot free. So yeah, I love the theme of sacrifice in this movie. As you can tell, I like the war part of this movie more, and that's the theme of sacrifice definitely plays into the war aspect of this movie more than say the romance part.
Yeah. I think those are two great themes.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you could say love.
Yeah.
But
commitment.
Honestly,
I don't know if it's commitment a theme. I mean,
I don't. But like. It would betray its own theme.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Stay committed to. Like, I don't know.
Friendship is a theme. I mean, for sure.
If you loved him so much, then be a widow for a year. Okay. Okay. No, sorry.
But I mean,
anyway,
I guess you could say friendship's a theme. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the acting, like we said, isn't great. But I mean, they don't come off as the acting doesn't really make the characters come off as the best of friends at all times. But nevertheless, they are portrayed as best friends, and I think friendship's definitely a theme. Like you said, forgiveness in friendships.
That's a good one. I think that sums it up pretty good.
Yeah,
so we can roll along to the historical stuff.
So Nate, I've done some historical research on this.
Cool.
And, reading up as I usually do. But you can go first. I want you to talk about what was your favorite historical part of this movie?
Well, I love movies about any historical event, and the events at Pearl Harbor were earth-shaking. They were earth-shattering. For anyone who doesn't know the background, obviously you probably know the basic background, but to get into a little bit more depth, the Japanese actually began World War II before the Germans did with their conquest in China, and the United States was backing, as it implies, the Chinese fight against the Japanese. The Japanese saw themselves as a superior race as well, but not quite in the way that Hitler did. It was more based on their ethics and their code of conduct, which was based on the samurai code of Bushido.
Yeah, which we talked about in our last samurai. Right?
We did talk about Bushido. Bushido had lived on, and I read a really cool book about the conquest in China called The Rape of Nanking, Iris Chang, and it goes into detail about the indoctrination programs that they used in their schools and how they brutalized these kids until they adhered to the standard, which was to die for your country was the greatest possible honor. This is why it was necessary to drop A-bombs.
We could honestly that's also kind of a theme from the Japanese perspective, because they kind of talk about that a little bit in the Japanese scenes. The general says, this is about obviously preserving our empire, because it would have been shameful to them if their empire just fell.
Yeah.
And obviously it eventually did.
The Japanese War Machine was very impressive. Not only were they were making huge gains against the Chinese and committing horrible atrocities along the way, by the way, but they also went to war with the Russians and destroyed the Russian Navy pretty much. And so they were on a two-part win streak here. Only problem is that the Japanese islands are not rich in rich in resources. This is why katanas back in feudal Japan were super valuable. Like in 47 Ronin, if we ever review that movie, it's not historical, but it's cool.
I heard that movie sucks.
They can. I like it.
Okay.
I see where people don't like it. It's a little bit corny, but anyway. But like swords were super valuable because metal. There wasn't a ton of iron, and there wasn't a ton of oil either. And so the Japanese all of a sudden had this huge navy, and as they talked about in the movie, they did not have the oil to keep it running. And so their hand was forced into war because they were aligned with the Germans. They decided to make war against the United States, which many people see as a horrible decision. It probably was, but hindsight is 20/20. So they thought that they could sink the entire American Pacific Fleet pretty much and gain supremacy. And here's the thing: they basically did. The only issue is that they did not bomb the repair yards at all. I don't even think a single bomb hit the repair yards. So the American Navy was able to let's just get these in here and fix them up real quick, and then we're good to go. And so, while they kept them on their heels with the Doolittle raid, and so thus began the Pacific.
Speaking of the Doolittle raid, I do like how it really emphasizes how that was so significant, even though it did minimal damage overall. It was symbolic. It was just a symbolic thing.
Yeah,
we mean business.
Exactly. And they launched freaking Army bombers off of an aircraft carrier. That's crazy.
Yeah. But anyway, if you're finished.
Yeah, I'm finished with that.
All right. So yeah, this movie, it does have a lot of historical inaccuracies. It's considered one of the more historically inaccurate movies about World War II ever made. So let's just get into them. There was a lot of controversy because obviously a lot of people who have ancestors who died at Pearl Harbor were really mad at all the liberties the filmmakers took. And obviously it's set around a fictional romance, but that's just one thing. I mean, they're not,
You can't.
I'm talking. There's a lot of historical inaccuracies that are just around the events leading up to Pearl Harbor, from what I've read. So first of all, and I was talking to Nate about this earlier, it portrays Rafe going into what they called the Eagle Squadron, which was an American unit fighting with the RAF, the Royal Air Force in the Battle of Britain, and it's portrayed as he volunteers to do this. Obviously, Danny thinks he's assigned, but it's revealed that he volunteered to go. However, in reality, U.S. airmen were prohibited from joining the squadron. But however, some American civilians did, apparently. But army men or military men were literally not allowed to do it. They were not allowed to join the Eagle squadrons. But in the movie, speaking of the Battle of Britain, it portrays the Battle of Britain as still happening in early 1941. Because the movie begins kind of after the opening sequence in Tennessee. Yeah. It's January 1941 in Long Island. And it portrays the Battle of Britain is still going, but it had actually ended in October of 1940. So that's just kind of an inaccuracy with the dates there. Yeah. But I don't know if they just didn't want to start their story in October, or I don't know if they just want. I don't know, January.
They could have definitely navigated around that with another quick 3 months later.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, because they do it. They do have a 3 months later thing at some point in the movie where it skips forward 3 months. But and then another inaccuracy regarding the attack on Pearl Harbor specifically is that the Japanese did not deliberately attack the medical hospitals like they do in the movie. In the movie they strafe the medical hospitals where all the nurses are, funny. And they kind of target civilians who are just running on the ground.
Yeah, and they also bomb random stuff. At
one point, a car.
Yeah, they bombed a car at one point. And I was as a Japanese pilot, I was like, dude, bomb that car. That'll really stick it.
Now, that's not to say that it wasn't damaged in the attack, but the Japanese, as far as we know, did not intentionally target the whatever you call it, the hospital. And that makes sense talking about the Bushido Code of Honor, because Japanese would not, that would be shameful to them to just kill innocent civilians.
Yep.
But I guess, in the movie, maybe they wanted to make them super villainous, so it was just let's have them kill innocent civilians.
And they were also just bombing everything.
Yeah, I know, yeah. But now, in reality, as of what I'm reading, only one medical staff member was killed.
Oh, wow.
During the attack.
Wow.
So that's actually, quite remarkable. But, obviously, as I said, as everybody knows, kind of the two main characters in this movie, along with the nurse, Danny, Rafe, and Evelyn, they're all fictional. This is not a true romantic story here. This is all this was created by the screenwriter Randall Wallace. However, Rafe and Danny are kind of similar to two guys who did really exist. Specifically in how they act during the attack on Pearl Harbor. There were these two guys. They were United States Army Air Force's second lieutenants George Welch and Kenneth M. Miller. These two guys were at Pearl Harbor, and they did get up in two P-40 Warhawks, and they got up in the skies, and they took out together 6 Japanese Zeros. And they also reported a few probables that they couldn't confirm.
Wow, but, that's a lot of kills. That makes them like aces in one day.
Yeah, I know. So these two guys did get up there and did some damage, just like Rafe and Danny do in the movie. Now, Rafe and Danny are still basically completely fictional, but they obviously got that plot line from.
That's really cool. I didn't know
these
that.
Two guys. Yeah, I didn't know that either until I was reading up.
By the way, P-40 Warhawks were not good planes.
Yeah.
They were, they flew.
You know more about them than I do.
Yeah, I was just going to say that they were, and they acknowledged this in the movie, they're slower and less maneuverable than Japanese.
Yeah, the Zeros. Yeah, he literally says, they're not nearly as fast as Japanese Zeros. But now, unfortunately, as I was saying, this movie got a lot of criticism from people. One of those people who criticized this movie was one of those guys.
Really?
He said, quote, he died. Taylor, who died in November of 2006, called the film adaptation a piece of trash, over sensationalized and distorted. So
a piece of trash.
He did not like it. And as you can tell, we have big negatives with it too. I'm not the biggest fan. Yeah, we can't have the perspective that he has, obviously. So there were also a lot of events in the movie that were kind of altered for the sake of drama, to add more tension and stuff. So Admiral Kimmel, who is the admiral at Pearl Harbor, who, as I said, I think the guy who played him did a good job.
Oh yeah.
But he did not. It says here that he in the movie he receives a report that a Jap sub had been kind of neutralized before the actual attack. I guess it was trying to infiltrate the harbor or something, and they saw it and they took it out. And it says here, I'll just read word for word. For example, Admiral Kimmel did not receive the report that a Japanese midget submarine was being attacked until after the bombs began falling, and did not receive the first official notification of the attack until several hours after the attack ended. So in the movie, he's obviously portrayed as knowing what's going on right from the start.
Yeah, but
he had no idea until after. I guess he was off somewhere.
I guess he was very engrossed in that game of golf.
If he was in the movie, he's playing golf when they tell him, but boom, he never knew about the attack until after it actually was over.
He must have been really far away.
I know, my word.
It's like
the island's not that big.
Yeah, I know. It's like
the harbor's not that big.
Atom bomb hitting on the other side of the island and being oblivious of it.
Yeah. So, and also another big inaccuracy in the movie, there's the scene where Roosevelt, right after the attack on Pearl Harbor, is right away demanding a retaliatory attack. This did not necessarily happen, or he demands a retaliatory attack on Japanese soil. He was not as quick in real life at just saying, okay, let's go attack them again. That was a little bit inaccurately portrayed. And Admiral Chester Nimitz and General George Marshall, in the movie, they're both like, we can't do that. That's not a real possibility. We couldn't pull that off because of a lot of different reasons. One of the reasons I think was because they were like, the bombers won't be able to get up off the aircraft. But
or the aircraft carrier.
Yeah, I know, but in real life, they were in total favor of such an attack. So they never they never had a dissenting view on that.
Wow, okay.
But and feel free to comment on any of these if you want to.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But and then also, there's a scene, and it's pretty cool in the movie, I will say, where Roosevelt stands up. Never happened. He did not, in a cabinet meeting, ever, stand up. And he said, he was confined to a wheelchair due to polio, obviously, at this time. And And obviously in the movie, like he's like, "Do not tell me that it cannot be done." And, I mean, it's a pretty cool line, but he didn't. He would not have been able to necessarily just on his own stand himself up to say that.
He had this medical helper, like he had that brace
but apparently in real life, at this point in his life, he was so severely stricken with polio that he would just not have been able to do that. There's no instance of him like standing up at his cabinet meetings.
It was cool that they had his little assistant George. Isn't he real?
I think probably so.
Yeah.
But and also in that same cabinet scene, you know, where they're debating on what to do, there's one of the advisors is like he's talking about how Japan is like probably planning an attack on the further into the U.S. Yeah, and in real life, you know, in reality, the Japanese honestly never, after Pearl Harbor, didn't really have the strength or the military power to execute such an attack.
That's ridiculous.
That was added for dramatic effect.
He said this line: "They would pierce as deep as Chicago before we could stop them." And I'm like,
yeah.
Wait a minute. You're saying that they could take California, Washington, Nevada, Wyoming, North South Dakota, Montana, Texas, you know, New Mexico, Oklahoma. You think that they could take all of those states before you could mobilize an armed response? Like, no. No. You realize how enduring the American resistance would have been, especially in the mountains of Montana. Like, obviously, you wouldn't need to subjugate every mountain in Montana in order to take the United States, but, like, think of all the major cities in California. Like, those were all major logistical military hubs.
I know, yeah.
They would have been staffed with military personnel and defense. Like, it's not like the Japanese would have just gone and they're just like, boo!
So that one kind of bothered you a little bit.
That did bother me. It's like, honestly, you think the Japanese are gonna land in Texas and just take it with no.
Especially all the rednecks over there, you know.
I mean, like, Lord have mercy on.
But I mean, apparently, military strategists didn't even believe that the Japanese could invade Australia or Siberia. So I mean, I mean, how could they have taken?
Oh my gosh! If you can't take, I mean, I guess there's the poisonous snakes to deal with in Australia, but like, you got that in Texas too. I mean, I don't think the Japanese would have had they weren't used to so much territory. They have this little island, and then they get on the United States, and it's
Japan is very small.
It is very
small island, not big.
Very small.
Now, very densely populated in Tokyo, obviously.
Yeah, but like I feel like they would have been caught in a campaign in California.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but and then obviously there's the famous scene where the Japanese General Admiral Yamamoto says the famous line. "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant." It's a very well-known quote. However, we do not have any hard evidence that he actually ever said this. It was actually
I
used.
believe it in my heart.
Yeah, it was used in the movie Tora 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 as well. But it's kind of there were certain words used in his journal along those lines, but we do not have that direct quote. Is a bit of a a reach. We don't actually know if he actually said that. Yeah, it's a cool quote. It's kind of I've heard you hear that quote.
It is kind of interesting how he decided not to do the third wave attack. He's pull back the third wave.
I didn't know about that, but apparently that was accurate.
I don't know if I just thought about that, but it's like, why would you do that? You only lost 29 out of 350 planes. Why would you? He's like, we've lost the element of surprise. They'd like, yeah, and they've lost like half their fleet. Keep attacking. I don't get that. Anyway. All right, you want to wrap it up?
Well, there's a few more. Yeah, there's a few more.
Okay, go for it.
Like I said, this movie is very historic, has some big inaccuracies. So finally, let's move on to the Doolittle raid and talk about was the Doolittle raid historically accurate? No, for the most part. In the movie, it betrays them, I believe, 624 miles off the Japanese coast when they're spotted by like a patrol of like U-boats, or not U-boats, patrol boats, Japanese patrol boats. In real life, they were actually like 650 miles off, so a little bit farther off, and it was like one patrol boat that spotted them, and so yeah, it was just one, not like a whole unit of patrol boats, and in the movie they also show the bombers. They just drop bombs on Tokyo, and in real life they had these They obviously bombed a few other strategic spots that they passed over, not just Tokyo. They don't really show this in the movie, but we're left to assume that, it was just, I don't know why they don't show that, but they just like show them bomb Tokyo and then they crash. And also, apparently, the damage they show them inflicting in the movie is a bit exaggerated. Apparently, they did not like blow up whole like massive buildings. It was very minimal damage, as we were talking about earlier. It was very much a symbolic attack.
And also in those B-29s, I feel like they would have been bombing from a way higher altitude
Yeah.
because they needed to avoid anti-aircraft fire. And also those bombers they're designed to be high altitude bombers. They were really low. There was a nitpick that I had for We Were Soldiers. It was concerning bomb timers.
Yeah.
Because they were bombing really low and it was igniting as soon as they hit the ground. And I was arguing that they could have damaged the aircraft with shrapnel. But what was really cool, it satisfied me, is that the Japanese bombs in this movie depicted bomb timers. They would hit the ground and
Yeah, that was a cool little detail, Dave. And the one guy thinks it's a dud, and then he gets absolutely blown to shreds or whatever. That was sad. But yeah, so the bombs probably do a bit more. The dual ray does a bit more damage in the movie, I think, than it probably did in real life, according to historians. And also, now I mentioned that it doesn't show them attacking those other the other strategic points in Japan. However, apparently, from what I've read, if you look closely on the chalkboard in the background, they do have them like laid out. They're like, okay, we're gonna attack here, here, and here, not just Tokyo. And they actually also there was 9. There was 9 aircraft, or there was a certain number of aircraft. Obviously, I don't know how many bombers there were.
They said like 19.
Okay, and in the background on that same chalkboard, it replaces the names of 2 real life individuals with the names of Danny and Rafe. Yeah. If you look closely, apparently, I found that interesting. But and also the whole plot line where they crash and are then they crash in China, and they're then attacked by these Japanese. We don't know that actually happened. That's obviously just kind of speculation. It could have happened. We do not know. But then apparently we talked about the period detail, and you said you liked all the production design. And I do agree. It looked all cool, but there were some pretty big anachronisms and like embellishments and like inaccuracies and like the planes and stuff. Apparently the warships they used modern warships, and they did their best to make them look like 1940s warships. And it's got some people think that they did not do a very good job. I wouldn't know enough about that to say.
Also, you got to cut them some slack. What are they going to do? Build a 1940s warship? Like, do you realize how expensive that would be?
Yeah.
I think that would.
And then at the beginning, it shows in the very opening scene, they're using this crop duster. Apparently, that specific. It was called a Stearman biplane crop duster. Yeah. And apparently in 1923, it actually would not have been invented yet. It was those crop dusters were invented in 1924. Actually, the first commercial. That was when the first commercial crop dusting company entered into operation. And obviously, here it says the U.S. Department of Agriculture did not purchase its first cotton dusting aircraft until April 16th, 1926. The crop duster in the first scene set in 1923 was not commercially available until the 30s.
Wow. So
that was a little bit of an inaccuracy. It says here that a lot of the Spitfires that the RAF uses, those are not accurate for the time period. They saw very limited use, and they were actually very unreliable.
Spitfires?
Yeah, Spitfires. I guess those were referring to the planes.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
Okay.
The Merlin engine was one of the best plane engines of the day. It was so good that they replaced the P-51's engine with the Spitfire's Merlin engine, and it turned a very mediocre plane into an extremely good dogfighter.
Okay. It just says, from what I'm reading, it just says they stopped using them because they viewed them as ineffective.
No,
so, the RAF did.
I disagree with that. I think that the British Spitfire was one of the most effective dogfighters of World War II. It was the only one that was as good as the German Bf-109, and without it, the Battle of Britain would have been lost. So
yeah, but apparently during the Battle of Britain, they really used Spitfire Mk1 and 2s.
Oh, so you're saying the model was different?
The model was different, okay, I guess is what I'm saying. They stopped using the cannon-armed Spitfires, apparently. Because they were ineffective. So I guess that clears that point. That and then also, there was some, and that was a little bit inaccurate there. They would have been using a different model. But there's also apparently there's a sailor in the movie movie that's smoking Marlboro cigarettes. I don't know if you picked up on that.
No.
But Marlboro cigarettes weren't introduced until 1972.
Wow.
And then, there's also at the beginning, there's that newsreel of like kind of what's happening in Europe in 1940. And it shows combat footage where there's an M26 Pershing tank fighting in Cologne. That did not happen until March of 1945.
Yeah.
They weren't fighting in Cologne.
Yeah, the M26,
that's in Germany, obviously.
The
Cologne.
M26 Pershing, I know, I really like that tank. That's one of my favorite tanks. I'm a little tank fanboy. I like tanks. M26 Pershing was a really cool tank. There's a really cool book written on it called Tip of the Spear. But yeah, John's right. That's a late period war tank.
Yeah, I know, and it would obviously the Battle of Cologne. That's in Germany, so obviously that battle would not be happening in 1940. I mean, it was the Germans pressing forward into these other European countries. But there's just a few more. It says that it has this army major that advises Kimmel about the defenses on the island. And he's like, how are you going to defend my boats? And he's like, we got this, and this. I got anti-aircraft guns, etc. He in the scene, he on the morning of December 7th, he's like playing chess. If you remember. And then he's addressed as a lieutenant, but in reality he was an army major. And then later, he's seen wearing an insignia that would be for a captain. So they call he's a major. Then they refer to him as a lieutenant, and then he's wearing an insignia of a captain. So I didn't pick up on that. That's just what I'm reading, but I do remember that character. And then apparently, there's a lot of, like I said, there's some inaccuracies with the ships and the warships. In the movie, they show 4 Spruance class destroyers that are bombed by the Japanese, and this class of ship didn't enter the U.S. Navy until 1970s. Mm-hmm. So that was inaccurate. They actually used an Iowa class battleship called the USS Missouri to represent the USS West Virginia. That is the ship that the cook, Doris Miller, the black guy, that was given a medal. That's the ship he served on. However, you can apparently, if you're an enthusiast and an expert on battleships, you'll be able to recognize that the West Virginia has lots of features that would not have been featured, that would not have existed on a what do you call it, on the battleship that would have been being used at the time, because obviously they're using a modern.
I'm going to cut them a little bit of slack for that, because if you're going to use real battleships, you have to use ones that are in existence. You're not going to be able to create your own battleships. That's not realistic. Yeah,
so there's a lot of things on like I said, they did their best to kind of make the modern ships they were using look like World War II ships. As somebody who doesn't know a lot about it, I didn't recognize any of the inaccuracies. This is just what I'm reading. And then the Iowa class ship actually. So they used the USS Missouri was what they used to represent the West Virginia. However, it never actually entered service until 1943, and it served from then onward in the U.S. Navy. And also there's apparently the USS Arizona Memorial. You can see it in the background during a scene that takes place months before the attack.
That's funny.
So that's I didn't notice that, but I'd be interested to go back and spot that. Because that's definitely, I don't know how they let that get in there.
That's dumb.
But and then a little inaccuracy. Doris Miller, the African American, he is they refer to him as a petty officer 2nd class. In real life, he was a petty officer 3rd class. So I don't know how they got that wrong. And then there's a lot. Apparently, it was controversial that they paint the Japanese Zeros slightly green in the movie. And Michael Bay said that this was to distinguish between the good planes and the bad planes. The Japanese and the Americans. However, Japanese Zeros were in reality gray, whitish. They were not green at all. He just knew that it was historically inaccurate. He just wanted a way to distinguish. So I can kind of forgive him for that. That makes sense. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, but I saw a lot of them that were white too.
Oh yeah. I don't think they were extraordinarily green. It was just you could see a little green tint to them. And then apparently, this is a real nitpick. But one of in Doolittle's trophy case in his office, apparently, there's a model of an F-86 Sabre, which wouldn't be flown until 1947. So a Sabre, I guess, is that meaning a sword?
No, that's a plane.
Oh, it's a plane. Okay, I'm just used to the word saber
You
meaning.
can't fly a sword.
Yeah, I know. I was about to. Yeah, I know. I don't know what I'm thinking. Saber is just use the words. I didn't know. Yeah, I'm being an idiot. They know so much more about planes. And then obviously a few final points on a few final anachronisms. The USS Hornet. Where the bombers flew off of, where Doolittle's Raiders launched off out of. It's shown in the movie as having kind of an angled flight deck. That would not have been that technology and that kind of type of design was not implemented until after the war. And in the movie, Hornet is portrayed by the ship they used in place of the Hornet was the USS Lexington. In real life, and that is a World War II era ship. However, in real life, the Hornet was a Yorktown class aircraft carrier. The Lexington is an Essex class aircraft carrier. So once again, they were doing their best to kind of take kind of modern designed ships and make them look as much as they could.
I just appreciate that they were using real ships.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they could have just made them all like
CG,
just filmed green screen and then put them in as CGI.
It looks terrible.
But yeah, and then apparently they filmed the takeoff sequences for the Doolittle raid on the USS Constellation. That's a Kitty Hawk class aircraft carrier. That never saw service until 1961. So once again, they're using modern ships in place of the World War II era ships. But I mean, it would have been hard for them to get a hold of a lot of World War II ships that are in good condition.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
So yeah, and then a few final ones. The differences between the Constellation and the real ship, which they would have been taking off on, or the real carrier, is that the Constellation had a much longer flight deck than the real. Let me make this. It says here the super carrier Constellation has a much longer flight deck than the Yorktown or Essex class carriers, giving the B-25s a substantially longer and safer takeoff run. So I guess in real life it was a shorter takeoff than it was in the movie.
They made it look really dramatic though.
Yeah, I know. And then but apparently they did get the Japanese aircraft carriers right. So they did. Those were portrayed accurately.
Wow, how did they get their hands on Japanese aircraft carriers?
Yeah, it says here the Japanese carriers are portrayed more correctly by comparison. Akagi and Hiryu did have their bridge conning tower superstructure on the port side rather than the more common starboard configuration. In the movie, it was done by maneuvering an Essex-class aircraft carrier backward to act as Akagi.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The fact that they did that's attention to detail.
Yeah, I know. And then one final little anachronism or inaccuracy, whatever you want to call this. They show the Department of War in the movie. There's that shot where it's like it says on this building Department of War, and also I think a little text below. And you can. I noticed this when watching it. It's obviously the U.S. Capitol. They're using the U.S. Capitol building to fill in for like the U.S. Department of War. But apparently, in 1941, the War Department was actually in what they called the War Department building, and that was in the Foggy Bottom neighborhood of Washington. Now it's renamed the Harry S. Truman Building, and it was renamed that in 2000. And in the munitions building on the National Mall, that's where it is now. But and obviously, so basically they weren't able to, I guess, film at the real War Department building, so they kind of just used the shots of the Capitol to stand in for it. But anyway, so there's some big historical inaccuracies in this movie. Then I was just kind of going over some different technical errors that they made. But yeah.
Well, what are your final thoughts on this, John?
I want you to go first. I've been catching my breath.
Yeah.
Sorry if I went a little bit too long there. I find all that interesting.
It is very interesting. John's over there like, but anyway, I think a great thing to say about this movie is that if you're doing a movie night and you've got a lady and you need to make a compromise, you want to watch some good war action, but you need to appease the women in the room by having some romance included, this is a great option. Like, just throw Pearl Harbor in there, and they will be happy, and you will be happy. Yeah, that's true. You know, they'll eat up the cheesy romance, and you'll eat up the bombs.
Will they eat up the cheesy romance?
I don't know. I think that women enjoy that kind of thing more.
Yeah.
So I think that it'd be a good compromise movie. History buffs will still enjoy this movie.
Even despite its inaccuracies.
You know, despite its inaccuracies, it's a great drama about important historical event. I think I would give this movie a 7.1.
Ooh, high. That's
7.1.
Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, so I actually went down. Like I slept on it. I was actually going to rate it 7.9, but then I went down. I woke up this morning. I was like, no, that's 7.1. I enjoyed it, but then all of the cheesiness detracted exactly 2.9 points. So,
Whoa, interesting. My final thoughts. Like I said, I divide this movie. It's like almost like two movies in one.
yeah,
The first half kind of sucks to me. The second half is pretty solid. So I think it has great cinematography. The score is great. There's so many moving moments in this movie, specifically during the Pearl Harbor attack scene. There's I like the way Michael Bay handled the dogfights for the most part. I like the plane action. I mean, it's not like Top Gun Maverick level, but
No.
it is solid. But then again, this movie came out 22 years before that, so I got to give him some slack there. I enjoy the war part of this movie, so that's mainly the second half of this movie. Now, the first half, like I said, kind of sucks. I have to give this. So the thing is, So like I said, the dialogue sucks. Especially the lovey-dovey dialogue, and then the acting is not very good. I'm talking about the acting of Ben Affleck, Josh Hartnett specifically. So I mean, and it's not just bad. To me, it's really bad. Like it's like atrocious, and like the dialogue and the acting. So I think that unfortunately, its lows are lower are lower than its highs are high. To me, if that makes any sense. And I have to give this a 4.9.
4.9.
Yes. Because, I mean, like I said, it's kind of half and half. But then even in that second half of the movie that I mostly enjoy, there's still some of that cringy dialogue in there that's hard to listen to. And some very cringeworthy acting. And that just lowers it just below a 5 out of 10 for me.
So I think that we wanted to just get a movie to bash on. This movie wasn't exactly that. But I do think it was a nice farewell to John.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry if I went too in deep with the historical
It's okay.
analysis. This
I
one
think-
just had a lot going, you know.
So John, tell the audience who are very attentively... Oh crap, we lost it again.
The conclusion.